Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it in front of everyone, right there at the Starbucks near her office. Her co-workers laughed softly, thinking it was just playful teasing, but I felt something crack inside me. She leaned across the table, perfect hair, perfect tone, and said, "Touch me when you start acting like a man." Then she went back to scrolling through LinkedIn like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I just went silent. That silence was the last sound she ever heard from the man she thought she could humiliate. Her name was Emily, my wife. 5 years married. I taught history at a local high school. She managed corporate growth strategies, whatever that meant. Our worlds had always been different, but lately, she made sure I never forgot it. She started comparing me to her new boss, Jason, loud, confident, always performing. "He's a real leader," she'd say. "You could learn something from him." At first, I laughed it off. Then I realized she wasn't joking. Every sentence became a test. Every silence became proof of my weakness. She didn't cheat with her body. She cheated with her admiration. She gave that to someone else. That night, after the Starbucks scene, she came home late. She had an IKEA bag in her hand. New decor for the apartment, a fresh start. I watched her assemble it while humming along to some empty Spotify playlist. She didn't notice I'd stopped speaking completely. When she finally looked up, she said, "What? You're mad now?" I shook my head. No, I wasn't mad. I was awake. The next morning, I left for work early. Parked in the school lot, I sat in my car, thinking about how history repeats itself. The Romans didn't lose because of their enemies. They lost because they stopped respecting themselves. By the time she texted, "Pick up milk on your way home," I'd already made another decision. I wasn't coming home. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I didn't leave a note. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped showing up. That's the thing about silence. When it comes from someone who used to explain everything, it's louder than rage. And in that silence, I started to remember who I was before she tried to define what a man should be. I didn't disappear right away. I faded, slowly, deliberately. At first, I just stopped trying to win her attention. I stopped asking how her day was, stopped pretending to care about her stories from the office. Instead, I watched. She didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She was too busy orbiting around her new son, her boss, Jason. The kind of man who speaks louder than he thinks, who fills every room with charm and noise. One evening, I dropped by her office unannounced, something I never did. They were standing close, laughing at something on his phone. When she saw me, her smile froze for half a second. Then she said, "Oh, Mark, this is Jason." He extended his hand, but his eyes were already measuring me, comparing. The handshake lasted 1 second too long. That's when I knew. It wasn't about him. It was about power. That night, she didn't come home until late. She said there was an after-work brainstorm at Starbucks. She smelled like coffee and attention. I didn't question her. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for writing opportunities. For years, I'd wanted to write a book about quiet strength, how real power doesn't need to shout. I'd written the first chapter years ago, then buried it under lesson plans and exhaustion. That night, I reopened the file. While she scrolled through her phone, I started rewriting my life in silence. A week later, she joked again. "You know, Jason said you remind him of his uncle. Nice guy, not very driven." She laughed. I didn't. Something in me went completely still. I saw it clearly then. The moment she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped entertaining her illusions. That weekend, while she was at IKEA buying more ways to rearrange our hollow apartment, I packed my things. No confrontation. No note. Just absence. I left my wedding ring on the counter next to her favorite coffee mug. Driving away, I didn't feel victorious. Just clear. The world outside the window looked sharper, colder. Like it had been waiting for me to finally see it. I didn't know where I was going yet. But I knew this. I wasn't going back. The first night away, I slept in my car on the edge of a small town 2 hours north. I watched the city lights fade in the rearview mirror, like the last sparks of a life that wasn't mine anymore. The silence didn't scare me. It steadied me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for approval. I rented a tiny apartment above a bookstore. Barnes & Noble was a 5-minute walk away, and I spent hours there, surrounded by the quiet hum of pages turning. No one knew me. No one expected anything. I started writing again, every morning before sunrise, every night before sleep. My words became the only voice I trusted. Meanwhile, Emily filled her days with performance. LinkedIn updates, photos from corporate retreats, stories about Jason's visionary leadership. Her world was polished and hollow. I didn't follow her, but the algorithm kept showing me pieces of her life. Pictures where she looked proud, but her eyes were searching for something. I didn't block her. I wanted her to see the silence growing between us. It wasn't revenge, it was distance earned. By the third month, my manuscript was done. I sent it to 3 publishers under a pseudonym. I didn't expect much, but 2 weeks later, one of them called. They wanted it. The title was simple, The Quiet Man. I sold my old car and bought a Tesla Model 3. Not for the look of it, for the sound, or rather, the lack of it. It moved like thought, smooth and wordless. Every drive felt like a chapter turning. I never told Emily, but somehow, I knew she'd find out. People like her always do. They need to measure their reflection in someone else's success. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message, just silence. Then another call, same thing. I didn't answer. I knew who it was. The woman who once said I wasn't a man was now trying to reach one she could no longer touch. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. She hadn't lost me because she rejected me. She lost me because I outgrew the version of me she thought she could control. Months passed like a quiet storm. My book came out under the name M. Hayes, and to my surprise, it found readers. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was honest. People were tired of noise. They wanted stillness that meant something. I started doing interviews, podcasts, quiet talks about balance and dignity. My voice, the same one she once dismissed as too calm, was now what people said made them listen. One night, my publisher sent me a link. They want you on a YouTube show, he said. The theme's transformation. I smiled. Fitting. The interview went live 2 weeks later. I didn't talk about Emily. I didn't need to. I spoke about silence, about how strength isn't the volume of your voice, but the clarity of your presence. I said, you don't have to announce when you've changed. The world will adjust to your absence. Somewhere across the city, she was watching. I knew it without proof. I imagined her sitting in her perfectly arranged IKEA living room, a half-empty Starbucks cup on the table, scrolling through YouTube after work. Then she'd pause. My face. My voice. The same man she told to grow up, now speaking with a calm that couldn't be faked. I didn't gloat. I just continued. People often confuse control with love, I said. But love doesn't shrink you, it expands you. The comments section filled with strangers calling the message powerful. I read none of them. I closed the laptop and went for a drive. The night outside was clean, open. The Tesla moved through it like water, silent, steady. I stopped near a lake and watched my reflection ripple on the surface. The next morning, my inbox was full. Publishers, journalists, invitations. But one email caught my eye. It was her. I saw the video. I'm proud of you. That's all it said. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had watched the man she tried to correct evolve into someone untouchable. And deep down, she knew the truth. She hadn't built me. Her words had only set the fire I used to rise. After that email, silence returned, but not the same kind. This one had weight. It was the silence of someone realizing the door had closed and would never open again. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. She'd already lost access to the part of me that used to wait. Weeks later, my publisher invited me to a speaking event downtown. When I arrived, I saw her across the room before I even stepped onto the stage. Emily, hair shorter, posture tighter, eyes scanning for control she no longer had. She was standing near the refreshment table, pretending to listen to someone, but her gaze kept drifting toward me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered what it felt like to sit in that Starbucks, hearing her laugh at my expense. The memory didn't sting anymore. It just clarified everything. I walked past her without hesitation. She said my name once, softly, like testing if it still had power. It didn't. I nodded politely and kept walking. The event went well. People asked questions, took photos, spoke about resilience and self-respect. I answered calmly, never once mentioning her. Later, I sat in the parking lot, the cool hum of the car wrapping around me like armor. My phone buzzed again, her name this time. I let it ring out. Then came a text. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment, then turned it face down. She was still trying to reach the man who once needed her validation. But that man was gone. When I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror, standing in the glow of streetlights, motionless. The kind of stillness that comes when someone realizes the audience they performed for has left the theater. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. Freedom isn't walking away. It's no longer being pulled back. I went home, brewed coffee, opened Spotify, and listened to a playlist of calm piano pieces. Each note felt like closure. She had chosen the noise once. I had chosen the silence. And the silence had won. A few months later, I started getting messages from people I didn't know, former colleagues of hers, some old mutual friends. They said things like, "Saw your interview, man. Powerful stuff," or "You really turned your life around." I thanked them politely and moved on, but I noticed something. None of them mentioned her anymore. She'd faded from the circle she once controlled. The same people who used to admire her now spoke about her in past tense, like she was a chapter that had already closed. One evening, I met with my editor at a small cafe near downtown. As we talked about the next project, I overheard two women at the table behind us. One of them said, "Isn't that the guy Emily used to talk about?" The other replied, "Yeah, she really messed that one up." They weren't whispering. They didn't need to. That's when I realized something important. Her fall wasn't loud. It was social, quiet, invisible. The kind that no one publicly mentions, but everyone silently recognizes. Later that night, I checked LinkedIn for the first time in months. Her profile was still there, but the energy was gone. The motivational quotes, the polished headshots, the endless posts about leadership culture, all gone. Just a blank photo and a short line under her name. Taking time to rediscover what matters. I stared at that line longer than I should have. It wasn't pity I felt. It was distance. The kind of distance that comes when two people are no longer on the same timeline. I closed the laptop, drove out of the city, and stopped at an overlook where the skyline shimmered in the night. The Tesla's dashboard glowed softly. The air felt clean. I thought about the way she used to define success: louder jobs, bigger houses, more recognition. But all that noise had turned into silence. My silence. Before driving back, I whispered into the night. Not to her, but to the version of me that once needed to prove himself. "We're done explaining," I said quietly. And for the first time, I felt it completely. Peace isn't something you earn from others. It's what remains when their voices stop matching. Time didn't heal anything. It clarified it. My days became steady, almost ritual. I'd wake before sunrise, write for an hour, take long walks near the coast, read at Barnes and Noble in the evenings. People there started recognizing me quietly, not as someone famous, but as someone they'd listened to. The man who spoke softly about strength. I liked that. It meant they heard the message, not the noise. One afternoon, as I was leaving the bookstore, I saw her again. She wasn't supposed to be there, yet somehow, she was. Standing near the window, looking at a display of books she didn't seem to see. For a moment, neither of us moved. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her confidence, that sharpness she wore like perfume, was gone. She smiled faintly, unsure. "You look good," she said. I nodded. "You too," I replied, though it wasn't true. Her eyes searched mine for something familiar, but what she used to own no longer existed. She asked if I had time for coffee. I hesitated, then agreed. Not for closure, just to see how far apart we drifted. We sat in silence at a small cafe, the same kind of place she once would have considered beneath her. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her drink. "I saw your interview again," she said quietly. "You really changed." I smiled. "No, I just stopped being who I wasn't." She looked down, then whispered, "I didn't know you had that in you." I didn't answer, because she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the ghost of the man who once tried to prove himself to her. That man no longer sat at the table. When we finished, she said, "Maybe someday we could talk, properly." I paid for the coffee, stood up, and told her, "Some conversations only exist in the past." Walking away, I didn't look back. In the reflection of the cafe window, I saw her staring at the empty chair across from her. That was the moment I knew. She hadn't come for me. She'd come for the silence that replaced me, and that silence no longer belonged to her. After that meeting, I didn't hear from her again for months. Life moved forward, quietly but with purpose. My second book was underway, and this time it was about identity, the kind that can't be given or taken by anyone else. It felt like I was writing from a higher altitude, above the noise, where the air was thinner but clean. Then one evening, I got a message from an old colleague. He mentioned that Emily had left her company. Apparently, her boss, Jason, had been fired for inappropriate behavior, and the department had fallen apart soon after. I didn't feel vindicated, just unsurprised. Her world had always been built on borrowed confidence, and when the source disappeared, so did her stability. Still, that night I thought about her, not with longing, but curiosity. How quickly the strong can crumble when their strength comes from others. I remembered the way she used to walk into a room, commanding, certain, untouchable. I wondered if she still did. A few days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a familiar book, my first one. On the first page, a note in her handwriting. I finally understand. Thank you for teaching me without speaking. No signature. No apology. Just that. I set the book on my desk and left it there. It wasn't closure, it was confirmation. She had finally heard what I'd been saying all along, though not in words. Silence had taught her more than I ever could. That weekend, I recorded a new podcast episode. I spoke about letting go, about how some people return not to reconnect, but to measure the distance they created. I ended with a line that wasn't planned. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let someone learn from your absence. When the episode went live on Spotify, I didn't think about who might listen. But deep down, I knew she would. And somewhere, maybe in that same IKEA-lit apartment, she'd sit alone, hearing my voice again. Not as her husband, not as her project, but as the man she once dared to underestimate. Fame never interested me, but recognition has a way of finding you when you stop chasing it. The podcast grew quickly, millions of downloads, invitations, book deals. My name, once tied to a classroom, now lived on screens and in quiet rooms across the country. People called it inspiring. I called it survival. One night, after a talk in Seattle, I checked my phone and saw her name again. Emily. A text this time, longer than before. I listened to your new episode. You're right. I learned too late. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was the kind of calm that comes after finishing a long race you never wanted to run. I didn't reply. She wasn't reaching out for forgiveness. She was reaching out to confirm I'd moved beyond her. And I had. Still, a few weeks later, I saw her in a photo online. Someone had tagged her at a conference, alone, sitting in the audience, looking smaller than I remembered. The caption read, "When the teacher becomes the student." It wasn't cruel, just true. Her life had collapsed not in flames, but in silence. The same silence she once used to punish me now surrounded her. I knew that feeling well. It's heavy when it doesn't belong to you. I drove that night with no destination, the car gliding through the rain. The world outside blurred, city lights streaking across the windshield. I thought about how every story has a sound. The laughter, the shouting, the final quiet. Ours ended without noise, just two people sitting in different worlds, remembering the same sentence. Touch me when you start acting like a man. She was right about one thing. I did become a man, just not the kind she could touch. By the time I got home, the rain had stopped. I sat in the car for a while, engine humming softly, the streetlights painting the night gold. I realized then, she hadn't been my downfall. She'd been my trigger, and the man she tried to belittle had become the man she'd spend the rest of her life trying to understand. A year later, I returned to the city, not for her, but for an interview. The studio was just a few blocks from where everything ended. The streets felt smaller now, familiar but distant, like walking through a dream you've already outgrown. After the recording, I decided to stop by the old Starbucks, the same one where she'd once said those words that changed everything. It looked different, renovated, brighter. The tables were new, but the air still carried that same hum of people pretending their lives were fine. I ordered a coffee, sat near the window, and watched the reflection of a life that used to be mine. That's when I saw her. Emily walked in alone, no ring, no co-workers, just her. She hesitated when she noticed me, like she wasn't sure if I was real. Then she walked over and said softly, "You still come here?" I smiled. Not really, just passing through. We talked for a few minutes about work, family, time. The small talk of strangers who share a past they can't revisit. She looked at me the way someone looks at a photo of who they used to be. Her voice cracked slightly when she said, "You really did become everything I said you weren't." I nodded. "You were right, Emily. I did. But not because of what you said, because I finally stopped listening." She smiled faintly, trying to hide the sting. Then she whispered, "I wish I'd seen this version of you sooner." I looked at her, calm, steady. "You did," I said. "You just didn't recognize him." When I stood to leave, she stayed seated, staring at her untouched drink. The same silence that once defined me now surrounded her. I walked out into the sunlight, the city noise fading behind me. As I reached the car, I glanced back once. Through the glass, she looked smaller than ever, framed by the same place where she once tried to break me. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And in the end, that silence became everything she could never fill. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.